3.1 million people. A coastline most of the world can't find on a map. And right now, some of the biggest names in energy, TotalEnergies, Shell, Galp, are racing to lock down a stretch of Atlantic seabed off this country's coast. This is Namibia, and this is the most concentrated energy and logistics build-out happening anywhere in Africa. But before we get excited about any of it, we're going to do what we always do on this channel: pull every number apart. Because when we checked this story against the operator's own disclosures, the government's own data, and the independent auditors who track this stuff, some of the boldest claims about Namibia didn't hold up. Others held up completely. We'll show you exactly which is which. Start with the oil. In 2022, TotalEnergies Venus discovery hit deep water off Namibia's southern coast, an estimated 3 billion barrels of recoverable resources, one of the largest deep-water oil finds anywhere in the past decade. A few hundred kilometers away, Galp's Mopane discovery is even bigger on paper. Early estimates put as much as 10 billion barrels of oil in place, though that's a rawer number than recoverable reserves, and Galp has already sold down 40% of its stake to bring in partners and spread the risk. Across the whole basin, the technical success rate on exploration wells has run above 30%, nearly double the African average of around 16%. That part is real, and it's why every major operator wants acreage here. But it hasn't been a straight line. Shell wrote off $400 million in January 2025 after calling some of its Namibian discoveries commercially unfeasible. Then, in 2026, its 10th well on that same license, Merlin 1X, came back with the strongest results yet, and Shell reversed course, expanding its drilling program instead of walking away. Here's the discipline part. None of this oil is flowing yet. Namibia's own petroleum commissioner now expects TotalEnergies to make its final investment decision on Venus in the fourth quarter of 2026, already pushed back a year. First oil is guided for sometime between 2029 and 2031. TotalEnergies' own chief executive has said the sanction itself depends on getting production costs under $20 a barrel. This is a real discovery. It is not yet a running project. 200 kilometers south, near the town of Lüderitz, sits the other half of this story: Hyphen hydrogen energy. The real committed figure, not the rounded up marketing number, the actual figure from the project's own financing documents, is $9.4 billion in total investment phased, with the first 2 gigawatt phase alone costed at $4.4 billion. At full build-out, this is meant to produce 2 million tons of green ammonia a year from roughly 7 gigawatts of wind and solar. Put that next to the country's economy, and the scale still lands hard. Namibia's entire annual GDP is around $17.3 billion. This one project, fully built, represents more than half of that in a single industrial development, not nearly the whole GDP as it's sometimes described, but more than half of a national economy riding on one hydrogen plant is still an extraordinary bet. None of this oil or hydrogen moves anywhere without a port, and Namibia already built one. The new container terminal at Walvis Bay very nearly doubled capacity from 400,000 containers a year to 750,000. From there, 3 corridors reach deep into the interior: the Trans-Kalahari to Botswana and South Africa, the Trans-Caprivi to Zambia, southern DRC, and Zimbabwe, and the Trans-Cunene into southern Angola. For landlocked southern Africa, Walvis Bay is the shortest line to the Atlantic, and a meaningful share of the containers moving through it were never headed for Namibia at all. Now, the part most coverage of this story skips, Namibia did just complete a genuinely stable transfer of power. Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah won the presidency in November 2024 with 58% of the vote, becoming Southern Africa's first female head of state after a peaceful succession following the sitting president's death earlier that year. But on the governance metric institutional investors actually track, Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, Namibia just posted its worst score on record. 46 out of 100, its steepest single-year decline ever. That's a real warning light, not a footnote. On currency, the story is simpler, and it holds up. The Namibian dollar has been pegged 1-to-1 to the South African rand since 1992, inside a formal currency union. And that peg is intact today. On credit, Fitch rates Namibia at BB- with a stable outlook. Sub-investment grade, meaning this is still a frontier risk credit, not a safe haven one, even as the growth story accelerates. If you want to know who's actually funding this, here are the names. The SDG Namibia One Fund is a blended finance vehicle worth roughly $1.15 billion, backed by the European Union's Global Gateway Strategy and Dutch Development Finance. It's already put $25 million directly into Hyphen's development budget. Behind that sits the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, and the African Development Bank, targeting more than $1 billion combined for Namibia's green industrialization. On the oil side, there's no retail accessible vehicle yet. This is still corporate and joint venture capital sitting on the balance sheets of TotalEnergies, Shell, and Galp. So here's where the caution has to come in full. First, nothing here is sanctioned yet. Every headline number in this video, the oil, the hydrogen, sits on decisions still expected in the second half of 2026. Second, offtake risk isn't theoretical. German utility RWE walked away from its ammonia supply agreement with Hyphen in September 2025. That agreement was never binding, and its collapse is a preview of how fragile announced demand can be at this stage. Third, Namibia's new local content policy for oil and gas was only approved in principle this year, and as written, it has no specified penalties for non-compliance, a live regulatory question mark for every operator in the basin. Then there's the ground itself. Hyphen's hydrogen plant sits inside Sao Chanotkib National Park, a protected desert coastline home to flamingos, African penguins, and plant species found nowhere else on Earth. Its environmental and social impact assessment wasn't complete as of the most recent public reporting, and Namibian civil society groups have publicly challenged both the ecological cost and the fairness of the government's proposed 24% equity stake. On water, Namibia does have a real desalination plant near Swakopmund, running since 2010 at roughly 20 to 22.5 million cubic meters a year, with a new joint venture adding capacity specifically for hydrogen and mining growth. It's a genuine head start, but it is not yet sized for hydrogen at full 7 gigawatt scale. So if you're tracking this from an institutional seat, here's the actual calendar. Fourth quarter 2026, TotalEnergies' final investment decision on Venus, the single biggest catalyst in the entire basin. Sometime in 2026, Hyphen's own targeted final investment decision. And every year, wherever you are, Transparency International's next Corruption Perceptions Index to see whether Namibia's governance trend keeps sliding or turns back around. Namibia's investment case is real, a genuinely rare discovery basin, a serious hydrogen bet, and a port built to move it all. But it is a pre-FID story sitting on a sub-investment grade credit and a governance trend that just got worse, not better. The opportunity is not fake, it is also not finished. That distinction is the whole thesis. That's the real story behind Namibia's energy and logistics boom. The numbers that hold up and the ones that don't yet. If you want the next verified African market breakdown before it's obvious, subscribe to African Market Network. See you in the next one.